It almost cost me my life to give up myself. That's one of those things you tend not to forget. So there have been temptations along the way, but I still return to, I could have died trying to be someone else. And I go, pretty good reason. So I stay true to that. The interesting other aspect of that, though, is that since then, and it has increased in levels over time, I have been continually acknowledged, rewarded, appreciated, and valued for being myself, which fairly well anchors it against the forces out there.
Hey there, Lyssa and deHart here, and welcome to the Coaching Studio, the podcast that dives deep with the brightest minds in coaching, psychology, organizational leadership, and the art of working with people. You'll hear intimate, thought-provoking conversations alongside rising and established voices shaping the future of human development. Expect real stories, bold ideas, and practical insights you can use to expand your coaching and leadership impact. Whether you're a coach, therapist, leader, or lifelong learner, you'll leave each episode with new insights and renewed inspiration. Let's go. Welcome to the Coaching Studio. I'm Lyssa and deHart, your host, and today's guest is someone who refuses to color within the lines, Michael Stratford, MCC, also known as the Provocateur of Transformation. Michael has been called everything from a wickedly irreverent comedian to a modern-day philosopher with a twinkle in his eye. He has had 56 jobs, yes, you heard that right, and somehow managed to turn every one of them into a masterclass of understanding what it means to be human. He has coached rock bands, executives, and trained over 7,500 coaches. He's written 4 books, and now he's turning personal development into a full-blown adventure with his latest project, MillionQuest. Michael is a bold, creative, and occasionally confrontational, in the best way. He challenges the ideas of normal and rejects the label of clients and invites us to see coaching not as a business transaction, but as a profoundly human partnership. Michael, welcome to the studio. I have a feeling this conversation is going to be part philosophy, part play, and part cosmic shakeup. So I'm so happy to have you here on the show today.
I'm really happy to be here. And one of the things that I enjoy about you is your enthusiasm for life and for how people, have this opportunity to grow, develop, but also to experience one of the full powers of coaching, which is possibility. It's a great part of our profession, and you embody that to me.
Well, I feel honored to hear that. So thank you very much for that. So first, before we even get into sort of where you came from, because you have such a rich history with coaching, this idea of you as a provocateur of transformation, I want to know what that means to you, because that's such a powerful label, so to say. And what does that mean for you?
Well, without some kind of stimulus, a catalytic moment, something like that has been prepared and nurtured by the ground seeded before it, transformation rarely happens. It does happen spontaneously, but it needs a poke every now and again. And it needs a poke in the construct, because we live from the construct of our beliefs, perceptions, all of that sort of thing. So without poking it, we don't get a chance to step into a different dimension and go, how is it really? What is that really like? And one of the most provocative things that I engage with is the concept of uniqueness that is so fundamental to the profession of coaching, and the full immersion into that as a mindset, as a philosophy, in and of itself provokes transformation away from human beings having to be like someone else in order to succeed or thrive or be fulfilled, and to be instead mostly, almost purely like themselves, which is obscured, forgotten, and ignored.
Yeah, and we're going to come back to this idea of the uniqueness because this is really fundamental to the work that you're doing, and I appreciate it greatly. So I really want to come back to it. And thank you for that kind of introduction to what this means to you, so that the listeners will have a sense of what this idea of provocateur. And I love the idea of we need to poke, really into the context of a person's sense of self so that we can support them to be curious with themselves and find that. Before you were this provocateur, who were you? Like, what led to this road that you find yourself on?
Mm. The source of that is that as I was growing up, hence 56 different jobs, but as I was growing up, I did not like me. I wanted to be anyone but me. So the notion of self-acceptance and uniqueness was alien for me. I mean, one of the professions I joined was theater, wherein you get to be other people. And I thought that would be easier than being me. And so I suppressed it in order to fit in, to belong, all of that. And I realized at some point I had to poke the construct that there was something fundamentally flawed in me for being different, and not recognizing that I had been living out of that construct for decades, actually. And so, as part of my self-development, personal growth journey, I took some really hard pokes at that to see who I was, um, including a process that I sometimes share with people, which is a process of called "Who Am I Without?" And it's a fill in the blank.
Who am I? Who am I
Fill
without?
in the
And then,
blank. Who am I
okay.
without achievements? Who am I without roles? Who am I without accomplishments? Who am I without my thoughts? Who am I without my emotions? Who am I without? Essentially trying to titrate down through a filtration process to the elemental essence of me, which in and of itself is very provocative to challenge the notion of identity that is sourced in all of the attachments of what we normally see as our identity. And we think, we think of it even in the language. People say, I am a coach. I'm not a coach. I coach. It's what I do. It's not who I am. Because when I was born as something before coaching even existed. So I can't be born a coach. I was born a human being, and coaching is one of the places of activity that I pour my essence into. I also garden, I ride my bicycle, I write books, I teach, I train, I do presentations, I lounge on the couch. Those are not who I am. It's what I do. And we have made a system of collapsing our identity of being when asked what is essentially a doing question. What do you do? I am that. No, you're not.
Excuse the interruption, Lyssa here. I would like to ask something from you. If you like this channel and you like the content that I'm offering, please do a simple, easy thing for me, which is subscribe to the channel. And on that note, let's get back to the show. This reminds me so much of the untethered soul in Michael
Hmm.
Singer's work of really like who are you, and that idea that you're bringing into this space, which I think is so fundamentally important, which is coaching is the doing of being with other people in a certain way and not necessarily who I am. And I don't know. I think what's brilliant here is, one, you took the time. Like, was there a catalyst to having this conversation with yourself that really drove this curiosity?
Um, there were several. One of them was a sort of dark moment, very dark moment. Um, I was in a place where relationship had gone in the toilet. I was working 3 jobs, one of which was painting apartments. And I woke up one morning while I was in this apartment that I had been hired to paint, going, uh, I don't feel like I have a future worth living into. And that moment um, had me, because I was in therapy for an abandonment issue, but that moment had me go over to the window, sit in the window frame, and start to lean out. And to give you a sense of the external referencing that was part of my nature at that time, one of the first thoughts that occurred to me was, the janitors are going to be pissed off at me for landing on the roof and they have to clean up the mess. The second one was, this woman is going to be angry with me because I didn't finish painting her apartment. That's how steeped in external self-reference it was. So I called my therapist after another moment, which was essentially, what if I'm wrong that I don't have a future? Because this was at 40, you know. So what if I'm wrong? So I called my therapist and I said, I'm not safe for myself. I need to be checked into a hospital. And what she did was she says, okay, I'll do that, but then I won't be able to be your therapist anymore because I don't work with suicides. And remember what she was there working with me on? Abandonment. So the two of us caught the idea right in the same moment. And she said, but I'm not abandoning you. And she says, I'll find you somebody else, who turned out to be brilliant, by the way. But there I was in the hospital, in the rec room, which is a euphemism. It's recreation, but it's also wrecks of humanity. And one day I see a box on the shelf over there, just the cardboard box, not the pictures on top. It was a jigsaw puzzle. 10,000 pieces was written on the side. And I know how to do jigsaw puzzles. I'd done them since I was a kid, and I love them. You get the frame, you get the color patterns, you do it all. It's very strategic. But something in me said no. And so what I did was I picked out one piece, put it on the table, and then I picked out another piece, put it next to it. Didn't fit. Put that over there. Another one, another one, another one, until I had 2. And I continued that process until the puzzle was finished. At a certain point, I left the hospital, went home, and I looked at my apartment and I said, I don't like that color paint. I only painted it that because my ex-wife wanted it. I don't like that sofa. I never liked that sofa. I only bought it because she wanted it. And I saw how much I had given myself away, and had the awareness that the first abandonment actually fundamentally is us abandoning ourselves. Yeah, you get it right away. And so I proceeded to actively go out and find out who I was, because one of the things that I became aware of was that I had no idea who I was without a woman in my life. I'd been a serial monogamous since I was like 17, you know? And so I deliberately decided not to date, not to hang out with, just who am I without that? And then I found I liked myself. And I started in that investigation to appreciate my difference, and then to seek all the ways in which that difference expressed itself. And that was, quite a journey. I didn't date for over 2 years or see anybody. It was just took myself to movies, museums, all that. And so that was a catalytic moment, that one in the window, where I went, what if I'm wrong? It's kind of an irrevocable choice I'm making here. So what, could have been
Yeah.
a tragedy turned out to be like so incredibly transformational.
I think that is so important for people to hear also, because I think that each of us, not everybody, but a lot of people come to these decision points like, what's the point of all of this? And they have these crises of self and these moments where they may make that,
Yeah.
you know, can't step back decision. And yet if they do choose to step back, if they do choose to discover themselves, because I think what you're saying here is so profound, which is our first and most important relationship is with us. I mean, I don't know anybody else that I am going to have known since the first breath I took till the last breath I take in that space, right? Like there's nobody else. And I may have a lot of people that I love in my life, but I'm the only one I will know that long. And I think that is just, if I'm not good in this relationship here, and that's really what I hear you saying, is that appreciation of your uniqueness, to, go back to that word, but the falling in love with yourself and the getting to know yourself, foibles and all, and that sort of appreciative inquiry to discover yourself.
Yeah. And what if none of those things are flaws? What if they are
Oh,
simply
what
a
if none
difference, a different organism, one of a kind, and we don't take the time to honor it or seek to understand it? Hence why I'm in coaching, which is by the time that profession was born, and I was around for some of the early days, it was the single and only, to my knowledge, profession to this day that emphasized supporting the discovery and self-expression and leveraging of the awareness of one's uniqueness. All the other personal development methodologies are basically saying, this is the way, this is the path, this is what you need to do, this is who you need to be, even, which is despicable language to me. But this one says, yeah, I don't know who you are, but you do. Because of what you said, the person that you have lived together with most is you, which means you are the penultimate expert on you. No one knows you better than you, even if you don't always optimally access that awareness. No one knows you better than you. And the joy in our profession for me is to see that blossom into sometimes a strange and odd flower or creature that we've never seen before and will never see again on the planet, which makes it even more precious, because that then becomes the one thing we can contribute that no one else can. Lots of people have our information, our knowledge, our skills, our history of business experience or life experience, all that sort of crap. But no one has the unique radiant energy configuration called you.
Yeah. And it's so interesting. I mean, we we hear a lot, we talk a lot about diversity. And I think one of the things that you're speaking to that is really important to me is that there, you can, even by putting a group of people together in a box on any level, is a way of separating them from the others. But the reality is each of us is so fundamentally unique that even if you and I grew up in the same family, even if you and I were twins, that there are going to be differences about things that we've experienced, because even twins once born have different experience. Even the birth
Yes.
process could be different for each twin. And so these experiences formulate we may be very similar, but none of us belongs to one culture either. We belong to a myriad of different perspectives. I'm a kayaker. I love dogs. I'm a, artist, right? Like all of these things become part of that sense of self that we were talking about
Mm.
before. And some of them may be labels as well, because when I was born, I wasn't necessarily an artist. I do believe I was a dog lover from the get-go. That's maybe my longest identity was animal lover. But I think this is really important. And as you're talking about it, I also think of the importance for coaches and therapists to hear this, because this idea that we could fix somebody else, that we have the answers to their uniqueness and how they would solve their own stuff is really hubris
Yes.
to a large degree. Yeah. How do you, I mean, you've trained over 7,500 coaches. How do you support that shift in mindset from fixer to partnership?
Mm. Well, first, depending on the culture and their awareness of what the word fix means. You brought up dogs. I know what happens when they fix dogs. I don't want that done to me. So,
Right, different kind of
it's like,
fixing.
no, 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 no. We're not fixing that. So, but I do tend to first articulate it. I even have a presentation that shows mathematically how unique you are. I give metaphors such as the elemental nature of each of us, like hydrogen and oxygen, that have certain properties, but they are not the same, even though they have similar, the gases, but they're not the same. And they do different things in combination with things. So I use a lot of metaphor for that, but then I engage with them from that perspective. So when they speak, I am listening to them, not for how they sound like anybody else, not for how their life story is similar to anyone else's. I'm listening for the depth of nuance and shading that is signaling how they are different already. And so the trainings that I do, and I'm doing a lot of work in China right now, is grounded in being before doing. So we work on the being piece first, because the doing stuff actually is relatively easy. It's also connected to the being things, because since who you are makes a difference in what you do, who you are being makes a difference in how you learn and what you learn. So when you come from a place of learning things from the perspective of how do I pass a credential, that's going to inform the learning. But if you come from the place of how do I completely understand how human beings work, or as much as possible, seek to understand, that St. Francis thing, seek to understand the difference. And so every one of my interactions is that. The MillionQuest is about that. Um, all of my coachings, when I do coachings demos, it's about that, because it's infused in that. And sometimes the students will say, yeah, you never seem to ask the same questions twice. And I say, well, is the person in front of me the same as the other person? Why would I ask them the same questions? So I also focus on their customization in their coaching, so that their customization picks up the language, the emotions, the energy, all of that kind of thing, so that they start to recognize that that one over there is different, and it doesn't serve them for me to ask a generic question that I could ask anyone who is sitting in front of me. On that simple level alone, I help them position themselves to enter the person's world who they are coaching, as if it is a sacred personal ecosystem, and they have to be very, very careful of not being an invasive species.
That's an invasive species in another person's internal landscape.
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting. So you brought up your MillionQuest. I would really love to hear more about this idea and really journey that you're inviting people on.
Well, it's number one, it's great fun. Number two, it incorporates so much of me. You know, my love of theater, my love of movies, my love of the fantasy world, my love of um, self-expression, but also my love of people working together to solve a challenge. The MillionQuest is in the center of it is like a 7-month adventure experience. We actually take people to 3 different locations. We have them set up in different worlds. It is like going to Game of Thrones for adult development. You go into a landscape. One is outside, which is the origins event, where we go back to our beginnings as human beings to kind of, as much as possible, return to a tabula rasa, that blank slate of who we think we are. The second one is a little bit more forward in time, and that's a village wherein we take people, we actually set up a village from different parts of the world, each one of them. And people have an adventure. They have to achieve things. They have to interact. And then the third one is one that is sort of futuristic. It's eco world, tech world, again, set up inside a ballroom and created. So my love of games as a teaching experiential model is probably truly most visible in this project, because to me, games are the first place where we exercise the muscle called assigning meaning. It only means something because we say so. And everything in the world is a made up game. Now, some people say, oh, that's frivolous. I say, yeah, but you don't know what the real meaning or origin of the word is. The word comes from gammon and gomen, Frisian and Norse, and it means, in one, it means joy. And in the other, it means communion. So joy in communion with other people. That's what games are essentially about. Joy in communion. And I learned about the way in which experiential learning from play is so profound when I watched my son stack blocks. There he was, stack, 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 stack. He's playing. And I'm over here watching, going, oh yeah, he knocked him down again. He's stacking him up, stacking him, knock him down again. And I realized he's learning about gravity. He's learning about counting. He's learning about balance. He's learning about perseverance. He's learning so many things without knowing he's learning. So it kind of goes in the back door, and it doesn't have to go through the front door of the cognitive, which is going to debate whether or not this is useful. It just goes in. And so I have set up these games, these adventures, etc., in the MillionQuest to help grow people's ability to engage with the world from a perception of self-mastery, which for me is not about being able to control the world, because we can't. I gave that up a long time ago. However, what we can do is be masterful in our response to whatever situations, events, and circumstances occur. Now, in order to grow that, this adventure game is a series of encounters with metaphorical challenges, like an avalanche of naysayers. Like you're going through the landscape and you've run into an avalanche of naysayers, which, by the way, anyone who's ever started a new project, been an entrepreneur, that's what you're going to run into. But why not have it be like a laboratory where you can experiment with how to face that in real life? So I have demons of doubt. I have icelands of inertia. I have artifacts of pain. I have all these different metaphorical challenges that human beings face, that I have culled from the experience of all of the people I have coached and what they presented to me. And then this is where the MillionQuest part comes in, and this is where it's most fun. In this event, which is 7 months, 3 events, and then online stuff. In this event, we challenge people in groups. It's 7 groups of 7 who wander through 7 realms. And we challenge the group to come up with a real live MillionQuest, defined as to positively support and preserve sentient beings, to have a positive impact on 1 million sentient beings. And then we say, you're in training and preparation for that, and we want you, when you leave, go do it. So that's our challenge for them. The reason for something like to positively affect the 1 million sentient beings is that without a challenge like that, we can't test whether or not they have learned about self-mastery. In the laboratory, it's theory. You try, I'm going to come up with this strategy.
Right.
But how do you know if something's been effective unless you test it? And it's not like testing it and saying, oh, I'll get a new client. No, that's not self-mastery. Self-mastery is facing a challenge that is worth facing to positively affect the lives of 1 million sentient beings. And now you go, oh. So we have to be really clear what we're doing. And each of the 7 realms has a sage of that realm. The 7 realms are culled again from my distillation of the experiences of people that I've worked with over 3 decades. They all fall under the category of self, which is your uniqueness and the expression of self-creation; vitality, which is your energy, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional vitality; your relationships, family, friends, community, coworkers; your participation, how you bring what you create into the world, which is a lot aligned with business or whatever, some kind of contribution; wealth, which is our relationship with this thing we call money, which is an exchange of value for value on an energetic level, so that becomes a healthy one. Then we have coexistence, which is the recognition of the interconnectedness of all of us. And then service, which is the awareness that it is not ultimately all about us. It's about contributing to the whole. We strengthen and honor our individuality, but we contribute to the whole. And there's 7 sages from different places. There's one person who's from Liberia. There's another person who is Latina. There are several people from Asia, one from Korea, 2 from China. There's one person with Jewish heritage, because I wanted a multicultural perspective as part of it. So that's MillionQuest that I do in my spare time, that has taken me over 15 years to put together as a presentation. I'm currently doing mini versions so people can get a taste, like going to Costco, get a taste. It's a 3-day version in person, because I found that talking about it mostly, people kind of get it conceptually, but you can't really get the taste of any food by the description in the menu.
Excuse the quick interruption, but I wanted to make sure that you knew that you were invited to my monthly Coaches Q&A. It happens every 3rd Monday of the month, and we talk about all things coaching. We talk about coaching demos, we talk about competencies, we talk about what to do with resistant clients, we talk about all sorts of things. Plus, we have an added networking event at the end of it. So you are invited to join this community. I would love to see you there. And on that note, let's get back to our regularly scheduled programming. Yeah, it's really that experiential piece that brings it to life. You have a book called The Game of Coaching. Is because you were talking about sort of the gamification, and then we were talking about the MillionQuest. Are those I mean, the game of coaching, though, really isn't about MillionQuest. It's really about this idea of this playing with and the communion with another person, the joyful communion of coaching, if I was hearing you correctly
Yeah.
earlier.
It is, first is the recognition that coaching is a game because it's made up like a game in the backyard. And so the rules of it are also made up, which means we can change them. We can modify, we can adjust them. Um, the notion that the game of coaching means it has a name. What's the name of the game that you're playing in the game of coaching? Is it the I'm in coaching only if it looks like it's going to win game? Or I'm in coaching until it wins and I'm going to keep on playing game, or any other game you decide you want it to be named? Who are the players? It's examining who are the players in your game. The concept of play is an essential element of it because play allows for creation, invention, non-attachment, having a winning definition. How do you win your game of coaching? Things like that. So there are 7 elements to it that I invite people to examine so that they can have a better experience than the game of coaching being like this business slog I have to master. Don't have to
Yeah.
master a business slog. It can be the most fun you've ever had, and it has been for me.
And it can continue to evolve and adjust and change depending on the person you're working with or the people you're working with. And as you too evolve, it changes.
Absolutely, in the way that all games have. The game of business, there was no such thing as a corporation in North America until the 1800s. Hudson Bay Company was the first corporation in America. That's a game that evolved. Business has its rules. Yeah, but they were made up. And one of the challenges for all of us is that most of us are born into a world where the games have already been made. We're playing by rules that were already created that we didn't create, and playing with players we're not really conscious of choosing. And then we're wondering why we're not winning. So I wanted to change the game of coaching to be something that we have authority of. So,
Yeah. It's so funny, Michael, as you're talking about this. Somebody once, I, it was a long time ago, but somebody once said, "Hey, there's this thing that we're doing, and everybody puts in $1,000, and then as you get people to put in $1,000 below you, then you'll get like $10,000 in like
yep.
I don't know, whatever, 3 levels or something." And I'm like, "That's a pyramid game." And they were like, "No, no, it's not a pyramid. It's something else." And I said, "Look, here's the deal with me. If I'm going to be in a pyramid deal, I'm going to be at the top of the pyramid. So I'd rather create my own thing to get to whatever it is
Yes.
versus like giving you $10,000 and, 3 other people give you $10,000 so that you can get to whatever your number is." And I don't want to be selling something that is for me not important. And so I think that's the other piece of it, right? Is that like if it's important, then then that's something that I'm happy to explore, talk about, I'm excited about, but I'm not trying to get you to do it. I'm just excitedly talking about whatever it is. And so it's not a manipulative, like, let me try and sell
Right.
you something kind of pyramid, right? But rather that idea of like, I want to go out and figure myself out and share what's important to me. And that's really kind of the thread that I'm hearing through all of this is like, how do we discover those things that are uniquely ours and also bring us joy, create community, and also give back in a useful
Yeah.
way to the other sentient beings on this experience of this planet that we have
Yes.
together.
Yes. Um, you know, it does require some searching, some pure curiosity. Who am I? You know, um, and the secondary question I call the shoe game, which is what fits me. So you
Mm.
know what it's like to have a shoe fit you and not fit you. You know, in doing presentations, you know what it's like when you got a shoe that looked nice, great color, matched what you needed it for and purpose and all that sort of stuff. Um, Style was right, everything except it was a little binding, and you're doing a presentation in it, and about 2 hours later, you have a blister.
Yeah. You're ready to take
Yes, you
those shoes
are.
off.
And so my uh, one of the gifts my mother gave me was the recognition that it's how important it is to have shoes that fit you for any number of criteria that you could walk in for a long time. And the interesting thing about that perspective is if that shoe doesn't fit you, it doesn't denigrate the shoe. For example, if a person you're potentially going to work with doesn't fit for you, it doesn't denigrate or say something bad about them. It says, put it back on the rack. Actually, that's for somebody else.
Right, because the right foot will show up.
Exactly. The right foot will show up and the right shoe will show up for you. And it's worth it to take the time. And we spend more time trying to get the right fit for our shoes than we do for the right fit in the players of the game we are playing called coaching or whatever.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
just life. I worked for the military for 7 years, and there were my husband was in the Air Force, and I worked for the Air Force, and I would have these young kids who would come into my office because they were fighting, with their spouse, and they had met somebody in a bar, thought they were cute, and decided, yes, this is the one forever. And of course, it was the one for not ever often. But it was like they spent more time, to your point, picking out shoes or really researching the vehicle they wanted to get than they did the person they were going to possibly spend the rest of their life with and have children with. And I always was like, that is such a fascinating disconnect to me.
Well, yeah, and it even starts a little bit further back because it's not only about the person researching the person you want to connect with, it's about knowing who you are. So you know what the fit is.
Yes.
You can't, it's like some people are going in blind, not knowing what their feet are. And then they're going to put a shoe on
Yeah.
them, and you just go, wait, what? See, we don't.
Yeah, you got to find your
Yes,
foot
exactly.
first. That's like babies, right? Like they put there's like, oh, there's these
Yep.
things, right? Hands and feet, and they're fascinated by them. But we lose that fascination once we start crawling, right? And so then we have to like rediscover our feet in this particular analogy we're
Exactly.
using.
And we have to not only rediscover it, but appreciate it because, oh, it's doesn't, I have these size toes and he's got those size toes. Are they better? Are they worse? No, they're just your size toes. So without knowing who we are, it is very difficult to make a selection for who is the best fit for us to be with, whether it's a mate, whether it's a friend, whether it's family members. There are people I have a brother I haven't seen in over 20 years. Why? Because I got very clear that he's not a fit for me. And I am not
Mm-hmm.
going to suffer the experience of wearing a shoe that's going to give me a blister in 5 minutes whenever I encounter it, just because we were born in the same family. So he's not a fit. And the thing about it is that when we find who we are and then we present that to the world and someone sees it and presents who they are to the world, the match is exquisite and in many ways effortless. Not that we don't have some friction every now and again, but my wife and I have been married for over 20 years, and I had two previous practice marriages that didn't become anywhere close to that because of where I was choosing from. Not about them and the kind of human beings they were, but where I was choosing from. I was choosing from these
Mm-hmm.
hungers, a hunger to belong, a hunger to be accepted, a hunger to be liked, a hunger to be loved, a hunger to feel important or validated with. I was choosing from these hungers because I wasn't feeding myself those things.
Yeah, and that's what I often think of that as the the wounds that we come into adulthood often with, that are, if we don't, to your point earlier, like if you don't take that time to learn who you are, to get to know this human being, figure out where your feet are, ground yourself, discover what kind of shoes work for you and what kind don't, that we then are. I used to say in marriage counseling all the time, like they'd say, should we get divorced? And one, I could never answer a question like that because I don't know how courageous you are, or how, or how willing you are to work on the relationship, right? Like, I mean, I don't have that answer, but we tend to take whatever the thing is that's not working in this relationship, and we tend to move it into the next one. So it starts off beautifully at the beginning because we are showing up with our best self. But to your point, those hungers that are driving us are going to emerge at some point, and that person is either going to or not going to be able to fulfill that, or we haven't become strong enough yet to nurture our own hungers so that we're not putting that unrealistic expectation on another person to feed us. I have been using a kind of an analogy of, people are not baby birds once they're about 18 or more, right? And so it's not our job to feed people, but it's an opportunity for them to learn to feed
Well,
themselves.
yes, it is an opportunity for us all to learn to feed ourselves the emotional food that we seem to be seeing everybody
Mm-hmm.
else as. You go to work, you see this person as that food. You see this client. It's particularly challenging in a coaching relationship where you're coaching this person, and now all of a sudden, actually, they're food that we are being used
They're
externally to
teaching.
feed ourselves. The interesting thing with the body is that after a certain age, we learn to feed ourselves food, and then we learn to make ourselves food, and then we learn to give ourselves food on a physical level. But we don't do that when we're adults on the emotional level. We still see and engage with people as if they're food.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we feed
Mm-hmm.
ourselves appreciation, valuing, love, connection, if we feed ourselves, we're not walking through the world seeing the world as food. They're now just people that we have the
Right.
opportunity to interact with. And it
Right.
takes all that edge off.
To your point, yeah, and to your point, it's we get to choose. We're a choice, and there, and then at that point, we're choosing the people that we resonate with over people just to feed whatever that unmet
Yes.
hunger is. Of please love me, please like me, please, 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 please. Yeah, no, that's so important. It's so incredibly important. You talked a lot about, well, you didn't talk a lot about it, but you mentioned, working in China and in Asia a lot. And what do you notice about how these different cultures are experience coaching, or influenced by the experience of coaching as you work across the planet, not really just in Asia, because you work with people
Yes.
all over the world? I mean, what are those sort of things that you notice, though, around how people use
Well,
coaching?
first, I noticed that the challenge is the same in all the cultures. We have been,
Can you say
yeah,
more about that?
the first challenge is that we have been conditioned to seek other people as source of solution, to look outside ourselves, to not go inside ourselves, to catalog our assets, to leverage our capabilities and our capacity. We have been trained to be like someone else. That's a worldwide message. Um,
I so appreciate you saying that, because that has been my experience as well. And I hear from people all the time, well, it's, that's just a Western philosophy. But I think it's a human experience of that external, validation, or that external to the rules of the game that are externalized that we buy
well,
into.
all we have to do is look at marketing anywhere in the world. Marketing is telling us,
Oh, that's
get this makeup on, buy this car, You'll be successful. Be like this person who has this or does this. That's the message. And
Mhm.
yes, to some
Mhm.
degree, one will get some modicum of success in that fashion, but never to the degree of which one feels 100% themselves in the process. There's always a price. There's always some kind of sacrifice. Typically, although not always, it shows up later in life when the questions of fulfillment start to come along. I can't fulfill
And
myself by being
legacy.
someone else. I used to be really good at it, and I can tap that ability if I want to. But now I am proud to say I suck at being somebody else. And I would rather be that, I don't want to be somebody else, and I don't want anyone to be me. There's already one of me. That's plenty. So that message is a worldwide message that says there are these ways in which one should or needs to behave in order to become successful. Be like them. And the world is filled with
Mhm.
programs about how to succeed following my program, which I was terrible at. I went through a lot of,
Although you were one of your jobs was an
yes,
actor, right?
yes, I was, yes, but I was terrible at following someone else's program for personal development and success. I was terrible at that.
Yeah.
And in every case, every time, even though I might have done what I was told by the program, it failed. And at no point did any leader of any of those programs say, yeah, we guess this program doesn't fit you. No, they said, there's something wrong with you.
You don't fit the
Yes, you don't fit the
program.
program. You're not committed enough. You didn't persevere. You're not using it the right ways. There's something wrong with you, which is why when I wound up going to this workshop in an apartment in Greenwich Village in 1992 with this guy named Thomas Leonard that a friend had recommended me to go to. And I said, oh, come on, one more program. And he says, no, please trust me. This is good for you. And I said, okay, I'll go. And I go, and he's talking about this new profession called coaching. And he talked for a little bit, and then he says, I want to do a demonstration. Who'd be willing to go? Who'd be willing to volunteer? And I went, okay, let's get it over with. You could tell me what to do with my life, and then I'll fail at that, and then you could tell me why I'm a failure. And so um, he asked me to present some sort of situation or challenge, and I did. And then he asked me this very, for me at the time, unusual question. He said, when you've been successful in the past, what methodology did you use? Now, in the role of coach, enough about the structure of the question to be able to take it apart and go, okay, first it's assuming I was successful in the past, which if I'm still alive, that's true. If I made enough money to pay for his workshop, that's also true. Okay, so there's some fact there. Um, and that there was some kind of methodology because I probably have had some repeated successes. So there's some sort of internal formula or recipe. And then if I looked hard enough, I could find out what it was. So at first I sat there blinking like Eeyore the donkey, just asked me, what is that? And so I fumbled out an answer. And then the next question comes and he says, and when you ran into obstacles, what character traits did you draw on inside to help you overcome them? Eeyore again, because I had no idea I had character traits, let alone what they were, and let alone that I used them in a repeated fashion. This went on for at most maybe 20 minutes. But in those 20 minutes, I was returned to myself as the source of my success path, as the author and problem solver and creator of my own success path. And I went, I want to do this for other people because it felt so good to finally experience that there was nothing wrong with me. This was another earlier signal of my difference. Oh, I'm different. That's why that didn't fit. I'm different. There's nothing wrong with me. I just don't do it that way. And that's part of the whole uniqueness presentation. But that
Mhm.
was not in the world as a methodology. Even the word coach is rife with telling, from sports, acting coach, singing coach, voice coach, all that sort of stuff. It is filled with it. So coach was the best word that could have been come up with at the time. I would have wished for a different word so that it wouldn't have to fight that, but that was fine. And all around the world, when people hear the
Yeah,
word coach, they're caught because they see in Europe, they see
right.
a football coach, soccer, they see a football coach and he's telling people what to do, et cetera. And now all of a sudden there's this other guy saying, no, but in coaching, we don't do that. So there's this disconnect. Yep.
Tension. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, you've sat with this for a minute. In your mind, I mean, and I love the kind of the movement from client to human being, right, or to person that you work with. If you were to wave your wand and change this word of coach, have you ever come up with a word that's better? I've sat with this question. I can't come up with anything I like
No, I
better.
can't because of the implication of all of the words that we've historically had. So it would need to be something that is invented, a la Shakespeare coming up with a new word.
Well, and I was thinking of Shakespeare earlier about all of us being actors upon a stage until we decide to be
Yes,
ourselves.
yes. And, it's not that I haven't come up with my own words. I have a couple of them. One of them is a quagestion, and that's a suggestion masquerading as a question. Yep, it's
Quagestion.
embedded. It's actually in a training course in one of the schools that I taught coaching at now as one of the terms for them to learn, which I thought was quite wonderful. But I found that there were a lot of people who would present what's called an open-ended question and then embed within the structure of an open-ended question a suggestion. So this
Mhm.
sounds like, an open-ended question. What would happen if you did this and facing your boss's um, angry, you know, interactions with you? Now, it sounds like I'm exploring open-ended questions about what are the possibilities, what you could do, but I have already suggested that you should face your boss.
Mhm.
So it's a question. It's a question masquerading as a question. But I would love to
Or
have a word
suggestion. Yeah.
that was a word for, um, at one point I entertained the word evocateur, not provocateur, but an evocateur, going back to what evoke means, which is to call from within. And
Right.
what if that is what we do? We One of our
Mhm.
competencies in the ICF is evoking awareness. What if that's our primary function? I wonder how that would change people's alignment with letting go of the attachment to their expertise and their knowledge base as their value and shift to, wow, I evoke people's self. I call it from within, almost like invoking the gods. I call it from within.
Yeah. I'm going to play with
Yeah.
evocateur.
I I did do that for a while, and then it was just too much work in the marketplace to give it any traction. I'm sure somebody will call
Yeah.
themselves that evocateur now, if they aren't already. Um, but I would actually think that now, as I look at it, I am less the provocateur of transformation than I am the evocateur. And the transformation is comes from the perceived historic sense of self to the true self, the genuine self, revealing itself.
Mm.
Yeah, I think I'm going to shift that on my bio.
Yeah. Well, and it happened here on this podcast.
There we are. Thank you, Lyssa.
I Here we are. You're so welcome. I'm so glad that emerged in our conversation as a new way of you being the evocateur of
Well,
transformation.
thanks for evoking it.
I have I think it was definitely the shared space that we find ourselves
Yes.
in for sure. Um, again, to the tradition of the show, I have a question from a prior guest, and so this is the question that was left for you. What helps you stay grounded and connected to your own truth when the world is pulling you in 100 different directions?
Well, I would have to say that actually it was anchored in the fact that it almost cost me my life to give up myself. That's one of those things you tend not to forget. So there have been temptations along the way, but I still return to, yeah, I could have died trying to be someone else. And I go, pretty good reason. So I stay true to that. The interesting other aspect of that, though, is that since then, and it has increased in levels over time, I have been continually acknowledged, rewarded, appreciated, and valued for being myself, which fairly well anchors it against the forces out there. So I have more good stuff about it, enough to counter anything that people come across and go, yeah, you need to. I go, no, thank you.
Yeah, you strike me as very much of a person wearing the right shoes with his feet firmly planted on the
Yes,
ground.
yes, very clearly. Because that's where I am. And, I have the ripe old age of 74, which is actually more mileage than years. So, I one of the really blissful things about that is that you start to just give up any need or hunger to get someone else's approval for their world becoming yours. I'm not tempted. I'm just not. And that means turning down work with people who are not a fit, regardless of the price. Now, admittedly, I'm in the space of luxury of being able to afford to do that. I remember when I couldn't,
Right.
but I also knew even then that it was valuable for me to financially position myself so that I could turn down work, which meant I wouldn't be accepting shoes that didn't fit. So I hope that,
Yeah, it really is a luxury of building a business that sustains you. And I think there's also something, and I'd be curious your thoughts on this, but I also do think there is something to what we learn by doing the early work where I don't know if paying the dues is the right way to say it, but I mean, I learned how to work with so many
yes,
different people as a result of positions that I had. And those experiences formed how I saw myself and how I was able to also work with others. And so occasionally I will come across somebody who I'm really misaligned with, and I'm like, I can find you somebody better than me. And then, but then other times I find my capacity to be with different people is very
yes.
broad as a result of all of those experiences that I had when I was getting my cutting my teeth as a therapist and then early as a coach as well.
Yeah, yes, you pointed to it. When it's truly deeply misaligned, I don't care. However, there are
Right.
people who are percentage misaligned, which is a difference. And people ask me what my niche is, my niche. I call it a niche. I mean, we say cliche. Why not?
I like niche,
And my
niche.
niche is people ask me, who do you focus on? I go, yeah, people who want to work with me that I want to work with. That's how I articulate it, which means I have to get a sense of them. They have to get a sense of me. And there has to be a chemistry that has the potential for deeper work, which invariably, and it doesn't matter the subject they're bringing, inside in the middle of a rotunda of doors, entry doors of many different subjects, is uniqueness. That's where we're always going to wind up going, and how to do that. And, as you said early, I've coached rock bands, I've coached executives, I've coached every industry. I've coached in every industry at every level around the globe, except government. I haven't been invited to do that. I don't know if that's something I'm interested in, but so I've encountered all sorts of people, and I truly appreciate your awareness. It says, yeah, that was really a precious gift to have the challenge of coaching with people who are not like me, who are not necessarily the best fit in the beginning, because it does, cut your teeth on that. It really does.
Yeah. It's it's it is, I think, the way we stretch
Yeah.
ourselves. Oh, Michael, I have so much appreciated this conversation. I want to let the viewers know, look below. There's links to Michael's books, to his website. If you want to find more out about the Million Quest, all of that is going to be available in the notes. So please look below. And Michael, thank you
Oh,
so very much for spending time with us
I
today.
I appreciate the invitation and the offer to spend time with a kindred spirit talking about things that are meaningful to us. I value that so much, because often our daily conversations are full of, details of this, that, the other thing that are ultimately, eh, but these moments, precious.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, time is precious. So when we have the opportunity to spend it wisely, it's
Yes,
wonderful. Thank you very much for this
you're welcome.
conversation.